All right, guys, Mr. Antonucci here. And in this section, we're going to talk about significance tests for a difference in population means. And to get started in this video in particular, we're going to talk about how to state the appropriate hypotheses, as well as check the conditions for performing a test about a difference between two populations. So in AP Stats, we're going to focus on situations where the hypothesized difference is zero. So in this situation, the mean difference is hypothesized to be zero, and then we're going to eventually look for a difference in that. So the conditions, same three conditions that we've been using, random 10% in normal large sample condition. So the key here with this is that the data have to come from two independent random samples or from two groups in a randomized experiment. When you're sampling without replacement, the 10% condition still applies. That means both sample sizes have to be less than 10% of the population. And then similar with the normal large sample, for each sample, the data have to either come from an approximately normally distributed population or the sample size um, is large, 30, at least 30, for each sample. If you don't know any of that, if either of those, both of those are not true, then for each sample, if the population distribution is unknown and your sample size is less than 30, then you graph the data and just confirm it shows no strong skewness or outliers. So let's take a look at this example here. The Wade Tract Preserve in Georgia is an old growth forest of longleaf pines that has survived in relatively undisturbed state for hundreds of years. One question of interest to foresters who study the area is how often, or excuse me, how do the sizes of the trees in the northern and southern halves of the forest compare? To find out, researchers took a random sample of 30 trees. Let me make that a little bit bigger, from each half and measured the diameter art breast height, DBH, in centimeters. Here's the comparative box plots and numerical summaries for the data. So we have the sample size, the mean standard deviation, as well as box plots of the data there. So foresters want to know whether these data provide convincing evidence of a difference mean DBH of the trees in the northern and southern halves of the Wade Tract Preserve at the 5% significance level. So we're going to state the appropriate hypothesis for performing a significance test here. So for this, we're going to do the null is mu north minus mu south equals 0. And then the alternative is mu north minus mu south is not equal to 0, where mu north equals the mean DBH in centimeters of all trees of the northern half of the forest, and mu south is the same thing for all the trees in the southern half of the forest. So it's very important when you do this to state your null and alternative hypothesis, as well as define the parameter of interest. Then we want to check the conditions for performing that the conditions are met for performing the test. Well, you got to go through the random. Each You had independent random samples of 30 trees from the northern and some southern halves of the forest, so that's good. 10%. It's reasonable to assume that both samples of size 30 are less than 10% of all the trees in the northern and southern half of the forest. And the normal large sample condition, since both samples are 30, that just meets the qualification for the sample size being at least 30. So the question we want to answer now is, do the data in the example provide some evidence of a difference in the mean DBH level of the trees in the northern and southern halves of the Wade Tract Preserve? So here's how we would do this. If we look up here um, with the summary statistics, you have the mean for the north and the mean for the south. So if we actually do the sample mean for the north minus the sample mean for the south, that's going to be 23.7 minus 34.53, which is negative 10.83. This is not equal to 0. So This gives some evidence. Now, we don't know if this is convenient, or excuse me, convincing evidence, because in order to determine that, we would need to construct or to figure out the p-value for this particular result. All right, guys, that's it for this one. Hope that was helpful to you.